The continuous bound placket is the easiest placket to make, so why are you still struggling to make them? I've got a tip for you today to help you make beautiful plackets, and I've never seen anyone quite do it like this before. So join me as I show you how to make continuous bound plackets. You'll most often find continuous bound plackets finishing the opening edges of button-up shirts on the shirt sleeve. They finish off the raw edges of the wrist opening and get sewn into the cuff. But if you want to cut open a slit anywhere in a garment, this is a really good method to use to finish off those raw edges. And in fact, here are two examples of blouses that have cut edges on the neckline and the two different ways I've used the continuous bound placket to finish those raw edges. Now, when sewing the continuous bound placket, you can use a placket piece that's either cut on the length straight grain or on the bias. You know what? You can cut it on the cross grain too. I'm not gonna tell you no. But there are pros and cons to using your placket piece cut in different ways. So a placket cut on the bias is going to stretch, and that works really well if you want a bound placket like this one, where the placket is laying open, it's not one side folded on top of the other. But I'm gonna show you right now how to do like a shirt sleeve opening, and for this method, there is an underside and a top side. And because the two pieces need to lay nice and flat on top of each other, when making a shirt sleeve opening like this, I really like to use plackets cut on the straight grain. All right, so let's see how to sew the continuous bound placket. Here I have a long rectangle, and we're gonna pretend that this long rectangle is a shirt sleeve. This edge down here is the wrist opening, and I'm gonna cut open where my placket needs to be sewn. Once you've cut open your wrist opening, we're gonna take it and we're gonna put the wrist side going in towards the sewing machine, and your shirt is going to be right side up. When you pull apart the cut opening, you want the left side, this cut edge, to go down under the presser foot. From here, grab your placket, and your placket is also going to be right side up. Now I cut my placket longer than I need because I find it's just easier to work with that way. So from here, I'm going to take my placket right side up and I'm going to put it underneath my shirt. I'm going to line up my cut raw edges up here at the wrist, but my placket is actually longer than the wrist, and that's a good thing. I like working with it like that. I think it makes it a lot easier. At a 1/4 inch seam allowance, or double check your sewing pattern to see what the seam allowance is, I'm gonna go ahead and put my needle down into the garment with all of these raw edges aligned. From here, I'm just gonna take a couple of stitches forward and a couple of stitches in reverse. After I've started my seam, I'm gonna take my garment and I'm gonna reach underneath to the placket and see how these two are separate. I am going to take my shirt and I'm gonna pivot my shirt slightly to the left while leaving the placket edge straight. And I'm going to estimate that the end of the cut edge right here, is going to be just shy of a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So my goal is to sew just to the left of the end of the cut opening. And then I'm going to sew a straight line. Now, as you're sewing, if you feel like your pivot wasn't great, like maybe you pivoted too much, maybe you didn't pivot quite enough, you can absolutely stop, lift your presser foot, and move things over a little bit. So from here, you can see where the fabric is folded right here. This is the edge. I want to sew just like one stitch past that point where the cut edge is. After you sew just past that edge, you're going to reach underneath your shirt, hold the placket, and take the shirt and swing the whole shirt around to the left while holding the placket straight, and then align the cut edge from the other side down with the placket. Now you see over here we have a bunch of bubbling. That's okay. Just twist the fabric out of the way And then once you have everything sorted, put your presser foot back down, and you should be looking at a very similar thing as you had on the other side, where you can see the placket at the point, and then it goes towards the wrist, and once you get to the wrist, our raw edges are aligned. And then just keep sewing a straight line. When you get to the end, back stitch, and now you're done with the first part. So here's what it looks like after we've sewn the placket to this cut opening. From here, we're gonna go back to where we started, and we're gonna reach underneath the shirt, grab the placket, and we're gonna flip the placket to the right. So now we have the right side of our garment, we have our stitching line, we have our seam allowances, and we have the wrong side of the placket. This is the secret hot pro tip that no one else does. We're gonna understitch all of the seam allowances to the placket. And notice at this point, I'm not ironing anything. I'm staying at the sewing machine and doing all of my sewing at once. After you're done understitching, this is what it looks like. Now, before we did the understitching, the placket wasn't staying so nicely flat. It kept wanting to go under. But because we've understitched it, now everything is super flat. And the last thing to do to close up these raw edges is to take your placket, fold back the raw edge, and then fold the placket again to just cover the line of stitching. And again, you'll notice I don't need to get up to press this. Because this placket piece is cut on the straight grain, it wants to fold and hold that fold really nicely. So from here, if you want, you could pin this in place if you're nervous about it, or if you're just uncomfortable sewing it right away. But I'm gonna just go to the sewing machine, and just to reiterate, I'm just covering that line of stitching. I'm not folding this whole thing over. I'm just covering the line of stitching. So I sew a little, I'm gonna come in here, fold this back, and you can see how nicely this lays with no getting up to press. And now we have sewn our placket on. Before we get up to go press, I do want to do two little tacks. From here, we were in the open position. We're now gonna go to the closed position. And because this is a shirt, I want one side to lay on top of the other side. Double check your pattern, make sure you're folding the right one on top of the right one. And I'm just gonna say that my left side is the underside and my right side is the overside. And I'm gonna tack this down so that the binding on the right side here folds under. I'm sewing this in the seam allowance, so a cuff would go on top here. And then the last thing to tack is this at the bottom. We wanna hold this shut, and we want to alleviate pressure from the fabric here where it was basically just cut. There was just, a snip there. So we wanna try and reinforce that area. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna close my placket up like this, and then I'm gonna hold it shut. I'm gonna fold back the garment, the shirt, and I'm gonna come to this fold, and I'm gonna sew a diagonal line right here on just the placket. I don't want to catch the shirt, just to reinforce that area and to help this placket stay nice and flat and closed. Okay, and so now we have sewn our placket and it's looking pretty good, but it's time to press this. And after we press this, it's gonna look super duper. Here we are at the ironing board. It's finally time to press. I'm gonna start by pressing around the placket itself, and then I'm gonna press the placket. So I'm gonna go inside on the under, and then I'm gonna lay the overside on top. And now I don't wanna press the end over here because I don't wanna put any creases in that zone. So up here, we just go around. The placket is done. Now don't forget that understitching. That is the key to making these beautiful plackets. And to making them really easily as well. If you want more sewing help from me, or if you want to meet other sewists, I hope you'll check out my social network called Social Sewists. You can learn more at socialsewist.com. And if you loved that back there, my cute little ironing board, I hope you'll check out this video to see how I made it. Thank you so much for watching. Excited to see you next time. Bye.